A stark warning from the World Health Organization this morning. The coronavirus pandemic is accelerating and the worst is yet to come. Plus, the Supreme Court rules on abortion and important news for anyone who has a food allergy. The FDA is relaxing food labeling laws. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Tuesday, June 30th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hello, Carlo. Good morning.
Hello, Jill. Good morning to you. Today is the last day of June. We made it another month.
So that means we're halfway through the year.
Oh, I didn't even think of it that way. Wow. Yeah. I don't know.
2020 has been amazing.
This is one of those weird things where, like, does it feel like it's been quick or does it feel like it's been 10 years? I think it feels like it's been about 10 years in the last 6 months.
I think so. I mean, think about this year. You know,
I know.
The impeachment stuff that we were covering was this year. I mean, that was like, I think February or January.
No, I think that was December, wasn't it? Well, I don't know. I do
was
know.
It?
The time has no meaning anymore. That's for sure.
Okay, well, on that note, let's get to the news here. So let's start with coronavirus. So if you had to design the optimal venue for COVID-19 transmission, you would do somewhere indoors, crowded, a lot of air conditioning, blowing air around, a lot of eating and drinking, talking, yelling, laughing, which means I have just described virtually every restaurant and bar in America. And there is growing consensus that indoor dining is the worst possible vector for the virus to spread. So more states are realizing this. New Jersey pushing back its plan to allow for indoor dining, probably for weeks. In New York City, both Governor Cuomo and Bill de Blasio saying that they are seriously considering exempting indoor dining from the city's phase 3 reopening, which is set for next week. Texas and Florida both recently shut down the state's bars. I'm sure more will follow. Meanwhile, the director of the World Health Organization says the pandemic is accelerating around the world and, quote, the worst is yet to come.
Yeah,
I would ask, how can it get worse? But I don't.
Never ask that question. Yeah, never ask that question. But look, Jill, I think that what you described right there is absolutely right. And the fact of the matter is, nobody wants to hear this, but activities that involve spending sustained time inside with a bunch of people you don't know are just too dangerous until we have a vaccine. And I think that's a hard truth. It's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. Maybe if we had a better contact tracing system in this country, it wouldn't be the case, but we don't. So it is. And it sucks. It sucks. I want to go back to restaurants. I want to go back to a bar, but we just can't. And I think that's what we're learning. If I were the president, I was thinking about this last night. If I were the president or if I were a governor, I would address my constituents today, and I would try and make this point because I don't feel like it's being made particularly well from anybody. You know, our ability to do things like sending our kids back to school in the fall and having some sense of normalcy come September, it depends on what we do right now, right? It doesn't depend on what happens then. It depends on where we're at based on the decisions we make right now because of how viral infections work. And we really need to, as a country, have a come to Jesus moment about this, I think. You know, if you want to send your kids to school in September, you have to close bars and restaurants today or, let them open for outdoor seating, right? We can do that. We can live without going inside and eating and drinking for 6 months. I think everybody is willing to make that sacrifice if it means, that we're in a better position when it comes to going to work and going to school. And it's summer. Like, let's take advantage of the fact. I think we've said this before, but like, we got a little bit in the sense that we got lucky at all this year. We got lucky in the fact that this virus came when it did in the spring, right? Because it's summer now. We can take advantage of that. And again, it's the Northeast is nice and it's not too hot, but I get that it's super hot in states like Arizona and Texas where this thing is raging. But let's just be creative. Like, let restaurants open, but put them outside and have fans blowing. Like. We just have to be more creative, I think. And the other thing that would have to be part of this announcement that I've just given as part of my presidency is we have to bail out these restaurants and bars too, as well as, movie theaters, concert halls, gyms, all of these indoor places where strangers gather. It's not their fault that this is happening, right? And they need to be taken care of. So I would really push for like a hospitality focused, bailout.
On the note of school, I just want to mention a group of pediatricians in the United States. They have come out really strongly just within the past 24, 48 hours. They put out a letter, actually, a really strong statement saying that kids need to go back to school in the fall. They basically said, at this point, they write, schools are fundamental to child and adolescent development and well-being. And they said that there's actually a lot of evidence that transmission of the virus by really young kids is not that common. And that's because they aren't as likely to get it in the first place. And they're not trying to downplay what's happening with that overreaction from the immune system to the virus, the Kawasaki disease, that reaction, which is extremely serious. But they're saying, just what is happening with kids in terms of the isolation and depression is a hugely serious problem, and that it's really incumbent on us right now to figure out a way to bring them back safely in the fall. So I just thought that was pretty fascinating. And what that means for the teachers, though, I don't
That's
know,
the
right?
question.
Because they're saying for kids, maybe it's safe, but
A lot of
again,
teachers are older. A lot of teachers are just, are older, and they are the ones who have to be in the. I mean, first of all, I agree. I think that, we do have to figure out a way to get kids back in school. This can't go on forever, especially because working parents are gonna not. You're a working parent. Like, luckily your daughter's not at school age yet, but working parents have to have a system in place here.
listen,
But
if
yeah,
my husband was not able, if my husband did not have flexibility, I would not have been able to work. Okay,
right.
because I, she's not at school age, but she can't. Someone has to watch her every
Yeah,
second of the
right.
day. Do you know what I
Exactly
mean?
right.
So I would have been some, and I would have been someone who I would have had to take a leave of absence from work. Actually,
Right.
if I didn't have a little bit of support, um, you know. And with just this idea of this indoor dining and stuff, I have already, Carlos, since yesterday, and your reaction to me telling you that I went to an outdoor restaurant and the shock that you had. I've actually, like I said, I've been feeling bad. I'm like, oh, like
No, 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 no. You
was
should not
that
feel
too
bad about that.
much?
Chill.
And I'm nervous. Like, was that something I shouldn't have done?
No,
But I did. The part of what factored into my decision, Cheddar spoke to this reporter from the Atlantic that you love, Carlo, James Hamblin.
I
Hamblin,
do love. I
he's
do love him.
actually has a medical license,
Yeah, he's smart.
and he specifically said he's not worried about outdoor dining. He's like,
Yeah.
that's just he said the biggest concern is what goes on inside, especially with air conditioning systems. And that's why actually Governor Cuomo has said in New York, malls and these indoor shopping centers cannot reopen unless they have air conditioning systems that could filter out the virus. So that's just how concerned they are. If you
I
think
saw
about
him
that.
say that yesterday, but I'm not sure that that exists. I could,
That's what I was thinking. There's air conditioning that filters out
and
coronavirus.
it's certainly not something you just sort of like slap on the wall, and it's so again, I think that our leaders, both at the state level and the federal level, have to be better about being like, look, these are the things that we cannot do until there's a vaccine, right? Going to the mall, going to an indoor restaurant, like that's just how it is. So let's figure out a way to work around that. Meanwhile, Jill, the White House started to refer to the current spike in COVID cases, which is accelerating, as quote unquote embers. So just don't fall for that. That's spin that I don't think people should listen to. All you have to do is look at the charts. If you Google COVID cases adjusted for population, you'll see where we're at. We're in an outbreak in this country, and even though the vast majority of us have done everything that we've been asked to do for months now at great sacrifice, it's just it's a fact of where we are. But I do think that the school question is something that we have to keep talking about, keep reporting on, because it is really, I think it is such a vexing question, and I don't know what the answer is, right? Because I completely agree, kids have got to go back to school, but again, easy for me to say. I'm not a 65-year-old immunocompromised kindergarten teacher who has to spend 6 hours a day in a classroom with like 30 sneezing children. So I don't know.
Right, who are sneezing and coughing on a good day.
Yeah, exactly.
Just imagine what that. And the other thing with schools is a lot of schools right now are coming up with like a few different plans that they have to present to, at least in New York, they come up with a few different plans that they have to present to the state for approval. And there's either all remote learning, all, go back to class entirely. But then the other option are kind of like these hybrid options of a couple days a week. You've got like A and B teams.
Yeah, right.
And the thing is what does that do as well? I mean, I guess that's better than nothing, but it still leaves parents who need to work in a really tough bind come
It's the
fall.
question of the
So
summer.
okay, the other big story that we're following, the Supreme Court struck down a Louisiana law that required all abortions to be done by doctors with admitting privileges at nearby hospitals. So this effectively would have left the state with a single abortion clinic. And this ruling is a major defeat for conservatives who are hoping that it would spell the beginning of the end for Roe v. Wade. For the third time in 3 weeks, Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the liberal wing of the court. It was a 5-4 decision. He was citing precedent from a similar 2016 ruling that was involving abortion clinics in Texas having to have admitting rights to a hospital.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this was the first abortion case since President Trump's two appointees joined the court, Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch. That's why it was so closely watched. But I got to say, Chief Justice Roberts becoming sort of like the de facto swing vote on this court is really surprising. I don't think that it means much in terms of precedent for how they're going to vote on other abortion cases, because this was sort of like you said, it was sort of like this narrow issue that they had already kind of ruled on in Texas. But there are more than a dozen abortion cases winding their way through the appeals court, which is like the step before you get to the Supreme Court. So this Supreme Court will get a chance sooner rather than later to directly take on Roe. Normally I'd say that Roe being overturned was sort of a foregone conclusion once you had this conservative majority solidified on the court. But given what Roberts is up to, I'm not so sure. He's very attuned to his legacy, and I think it's a coin toss how he would rule on a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade right now.
It does make the next election that much more crucial for the Supreme Court. So depending on what is important to you in terms of abortion rights and voting rights and some issues like that, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is not in the best of health.
No.
She's
she
how
will
old is
she will I don't know, but she will. I think she's basically hanging on to so she doesn't retire under President Trump.
Yep.
But I don't know if she'll be able to do that for another 4 years. So yeah, look, conservatives are very good at this. Conservatives are very good at understanding why the court is so important, and making voting decisions based on that. Liberals aren't, and this is what happens.
Susan Collins, the senator for Maine, she was getting slammed on Twitter yesterday. I don't know if you remember, there was back when the Congress was approving Brett Kavanaugh for Supreme Court. She came out and she said she does not think that she thinks that he'll follow precedent and never overturn Roe v. Wade. So they were taking kind of like, people on Twitter were taking like a little soundbite from when she gave her statement that she was going to support his nomination.
Yeah.
It was pretty, anyway. Okay. Also, an update now on a big story that, sorry for that tangent. It was just,
No. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
What's interesting though is we are watching decisions that lawmakers make have real policy
Absolutely.
implications and real life implications. So this is why it matters. And I'm not saying vote in either direction, but this is why you should vote. Vote for people who, for the most part, who hold your values. Exactly. Okay. Also, an update now on a big story that we discussed yesterday. The New York Times reporting that President Trump did indeed receive a written briefing in late February from intelligence officials that laid out their concerns that Russia was offering cash rewards to militants in Afghanistan for killing U.S. troops. The White House has said the president was never briefed on the issue and that the intelligence was never verified. Although we should point out the president is often briefed on intel that isn't verified, that it's, that's not
Yeah, I mean,
100%.
that's almost all intelligence is essentially that. President Trump is known not to read the PDB, which is the presidential daily briefing, like the morning binder that he gets from the intelligence community, and prefers oral briefings.
He wants the Cliff Notes.
He wants the Cliff Notes. He wants someone to tell him what's in there. I guess if you're president, you can do that, right? But this is back to what you said yesterday, Jill. What's worse, that he wasn't briefed or that he was briefed and we didn't do anything about this? I mean, this is really egregious, and it's becoming. The reporting is now not just in the New York Times. There's a lot of other outlets that have corroborated this, which makes me feel like it's probably the truth. The New York Times is also reporting this morning that a car bomb that killed 3 American soldiers in April of 2019 is now thought to have been one of these attacks that was done at the behest of this Russian plot, which we still don't know how high up it went, which I guess is the big question. By the way, remember in 2012 when poor old Mitt Romney, said in one of the debates against Barack Obama that Russia was our greatest geopolitical foe, and everybody laughed at him like he was like mocked for that. Perhaps we owe Mr. Romney an apology because it's maybe China's a greater one, but Russia's got to be up there.
Absolutely. And Mitt Romney has really become this voice, I think, for Republicans who feel that Donald Trump has taken the party in the wrong direction. So I guess you could say everything kind of happens for a reason, and this led him to Senate. But again,
He's
really
an
interesting
case,
to
yeah.
look at these public statements. That's why Twitter is so interesting with President Trump as well, because he's been on Twitter long before he was president. JD Durkin, who's the Cheddar White House correspondent, he does a really good job of taking the president's tweets from years ago and kind of just finding them every time they're relevant for a news story that's going on. On that, social media platforms now implementing a sweeping ban of users and groups that are deemed to be promoting hate speech. So Reddit kicked off hundreds of subreddits, as they're called, including the popular pro-Trump fan forum. It's known as the Donald. Twitch temporarily suspended President Trump's official channel for hateful conduct. That's in quotes, for what they allege is hateful conduct. And YouTube banned 6 channels for white supremacist content.
Yeah, it almost felt like they were doing this in tandem, although I don't think that they were. Remember, I always forget this, but Twitch is Amazon, which is just an important note here. And I suspect that,
you know what? You're right. I always forget that too.
Yeah, so I suspect that President Trump will make that he will say something today about Jeff Bezos being behind this, is my guess. Also, that Reddit Trump forum, the Donald, that is getting all this attention, it had actually been dormant for a while. So this actually isn't that big of a deal, other than for the symbolism. They had moved to some other one of these other like 4chan or one of those forums. I generally, as has been made pretty clear on this podcast, Jill, but I generally believe corporations pretty much only make decisions based on their own self-interest. So my bet here is that if you want to take anything away from these bans, it's that these companies think that President Trump is going to lose in November. And they see a Biden administration, especially if Elizabeth Warren is involved as vice president or as a cabinet official, as some, as an administration that's going to take a harder line on Silicon Valley. So they can say, hey, we were acting, we were doing our best. That's just that's my gut.
So that's a really good take, Carlo. Do you think Elizabeth Warren, I keep hearing more and more chatter about her being pretty high on the VP list. Are you thinking that she's a real possibility?
I mean, I think that she's got to be on the short list. But I mean, Elizabeth, she's a tricky one, right? She didn't even win. I think she came in like 3rd in the Massachusetts primary. And that's her home state. I told you who I think the VP should be, right?
Michelle Obama.
Not that I think, yeah, Michelle Obama. I think if Joe Biden chooses Michelle Obama, it's over tomorrow. It'll never happen in a million years, and I don't think she would ever do it. But
I don't know actually, because a friend of mine texted me the other day, yesterday actually, saying, "Do you think?" I don't know. Everyone, my friends think I'm like this politics guru. And I think because we do
you are
this
kind of,
podcast, and I do
yeah,
love politics. And
yeah.
he's like, "Is there any way that he's going to pick Michelle Obama? What do you think? And would she take it?" Um, I don't know.
I mean, I don't think she would want to. The question is, could he and the former president convince her to do it? That I don't know.
I told him he should. I wanted to give him your number. I said my
Please
podcast
no.
bud Carlo. Okay, something to keep an eye on in the world of sports. Pro sports, a small but growing number of basketball and baseball players are choosing to opt out of play when the two leagues resume their seasons in the next few weeks. What is this about, Carlo? Is this about their safety, or that's just like
Yeah.
too annoying?
No,
What's the concern?
I think what you're seeing is these players coming out and saying like this is just not worth it. So you have the outfielder for the Colorado Rockies, Ian Desmond, says it's just too risky. He's not going to do it. Mike Leake of the Diamondbacks, Ryan Zimmerman, and Joe Ross of the Nationals, who are the defending. The Nationals won the World Series last year, right? I think so. Or did the Astros win? I don't remember.
I
Anyway,
don't know.
they're Zimmerman and Ross are
I
both
don't know, and
players
I don't have
on
time
the
to Google
national. Yeah, they're opting not to play. They didn't give a reason. In the NBA, in the Brooklyn Nets, my hometown team, DeAndre Jordan tested positive for the virus and says he's just not going to, out of an abundance of caution, he's just not going to go down to Orlando. And his teammate Wilson Chandler, citing family concerns, which I assume is the same thing as just saying it's just too risky. So that's my. Oh, bless you.
Excuse me.
That's my tally as of now. If anyone sees any others, let me know, because I think that we're going to see more of this. I don't know if it'll be enough to sink these seasons, although I do have a feeling that we may not get these seasons, but I could be wrong. Although on this note, Joel, a buddy of mine the other day floated this idea that I thought was so smart, and I haven't heard anyone else say, just play in Europe. Do the NBA or do Major League Baseball and play in Europe. I mean, it's probably too late to get that figured out now. I think maybe the NFL could potentially pull it off, but like, isn't that kind of an interesting idea? They have the stadiums.
That's super interesting. I mean, and it's just so sad, right?
Pathetic, really.
Europe's
It's
outbreak
absurd.
didn't start much before ours, and they've got this thing pretty locked down. A story that is super important to Carlo, that I want to hit. The food allergy community really concerned right now that the FDA, they recently moved to loosen food labeling restrictions. So there's a lot of concern that this could be very seriously dangerous to people who have severe reactions to certain allergens. So here's what happened. In order to help ease disruptions in the food supply chain during the coronavirus pandemic, the FDA changed their ruling and is now allowing food manufacturers to swap ingredients in their products, but they don't have to reflect that change on the food label.
Right.
So the big 8 allergens, as they're called, things like soybeans, peanuts, eggs, those are excluded. Okay, but millions of Americans are also allergic to lesser known allergens, things like sesame. So this is extremely, extremely dangerous.
Right, because if you're allergic, if I'm allergic to sesame and I go buy something that I don't believe has sesame in it because it never used to, now it potentially could, and I wouldn't know. That's the takeaway, right?
Right. So my daughter has food allergies. Okay, so
Yeah.
I was never really tuned into this stuff because I don't have food
Sure.
allergies, and my husband doesn't have food allergies, but my daughter has a bunch of severe food allergies. So we meticulously read labels, okay?
Right.
And anything that even says like spices or natural flavoring, we just don't do because you don't know what's in it, okay? But if
Right.
all of the ingredients are there and it says it was made in a peanut-free facility or whatever it may be, we go ahead. And so we have known foods that that are tried and true, bread, things that like we know that she could tolerate. Now the FDA is basically saying food manufacturers can change ingredients. So just say they have a shortage of one type of oil and they decide to put sesame oil and use that instead. They don't have to then change the label or have anything on their food that would say, okay, we changed the recipe here. And so we would then, in theory, get our bread that we know is safe, and it would no longer be safe. And then potentially, God forbid, if there was a severe reaction, then you have to go to the hospital. Who wants to go to the hospital, right? I mean, you don't
Yeah,
want to go to
really.
hospital on a good day in a perfect situation, but then
Right.
imagine having to go to a hospital right now in the middle of a COVID pandemic. So I understand the reasoning behind why the FDA did this, but I think the
That's an important
unintended
story. Yeah.
consequences aren't worth it.
No, that's
By the
definitely
way,
we should follow this. Yeah.
700,000 people in this country have a sesame allergy, and that's just sesame.
Right.
And my daughter has a sesame allergy, and I remember I mentioned it at work to somebody, and they said, "Oh," and they rattled off 4 other people in the newsroom who had sesame allergies. So
Really.
these are not uncommon, and
Right.
food
Right. Right.
allergens are only becoming a bigger problem with for whatever reason. There's many theories as to why they're more prevalent now, but they are. So I just think this was a really I it's inexplicable to me, and I
No,
quite frankly unacceptable that they did this.
well, I'm glad you brought it up because yeah, this is just I don't have any food allergies, so it's just not something I pay attention to. But no, I'm glad we're talking about it. Well, on
Okay,
that
should we
happy
end
note,
there?
Jill.
I know. Sorry, everybody. Okay, everybody, that's what you need to know for Tuesday, June 30th. Carlo, enjoy wherever it is that you are.
Ah,
Eastern Long
it's nice.
Island, enjoying the good life.
That's me. Yeah, we'll see you guys. We'll see you in July.
I'm like 500 times your size right now, by the way, in this video.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody.